The police should be here any minute. I called them an hour ago. My daughter's voice cut through the music like a blade. 60 people went quiet at once. Forks stopped midair. Laughter died. The candles on my birthday cake were still burning. I stood near the fireplace, holding a glass of sparkling water, staring at Brittany as if she were a stranger. "I didn't want to do this tonight," she said, lifting a microphone I didn't even know we owned. "But my father is no longer mentally stable enough to run Callahan Pharmaceutical." Gasps filled my living room. 5 minutes earlier, she had hugged me, kissed my cheek, led everyone in singing happy birthday. Now she was dismantling me in front of family, staff, neighbors, my entire executive team. He's been acting confused, forgetful, hiding disturbing materials in the basement. My chest tightened. I opened my mouth to speak, but the doorbell rang. She smiled. "If you're already shocked by what you just witnessed, you're not alone. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know this story is reaching people who understand." Now, let me tell you how I got here. My name is Warren Callahan, and that was the moment my daughter tried to destroy me. 2 police officers stepped inside my home while my birthday cake still burned on the table. "Mr. Callahan?" the older one asked. "We received a wellness concern." Brittany rushed forward like a worried nurse. "Thank you for coming. My father has been collecting disturbing materials in the basement. Financial papers, lists, obsessive notes. He's paranoid." Paranoid. I felt 60 pairs of eyes on my back. "Sir," the officer said gently, "do you consent to us taking a look?" If I refused, I'd look unstable. If I argued, I'd prove her point. So I nodded. Of course. We walked downstairs together. Brittany followed close behind. Confident. Certain. The basement lights came on. Metal shelves lined the walls. Bankers' boxes stacked neatly. Files labeled with dates. The officer opened the first box. Inside were organized vendor contracts, highlighted invoices, timeline charts, not madness, documentation. He looked at me. "Why were you keeping all this?" I met Brittany's eyes across the room. "Because," I said calmly, "someone has been stealing from my company." Her face lost color. The older officer set the box down slowly. He looked at the shelves. All of them, floor to ceiling, years of careful work. "How much are we talking about?" he asked. $20 million. I said, "Minimum." The younger officer wrote something down. Brittany stepped forward. "This is exactly what I mean. He's obsessed. Paranoid. He thinks everyone around him is conspiring." The older officer turned to her. His voice was even. "Ma'am, these are organized financial records. Dated. Cross-referenced." He paused. "This is not the behavior of someone confused." Brittany opened her mouth, closed it again. That was the first crack. Not in me. In her. The officers left 20 minutes later. No weapons drawn. No accusations. No arrests. Just a quiet suggestion that maybe family discussions would be better handled privately. But the damage had already spread through my living room like smoke. Whispers started. My sales manager avoided eye contact. My neighbor shook his head slowly. Brittany stood in the corner, typing fast on her phone. My watch buzzed. Board of Directors group chat. Her message read, "For the safety of the company, I believe my father is no longer competent to serve as managing director. I am requesting immediate board intervention." She had timed this. She wasn't panicking. She was executing. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. Not anger, disappointment. We walked back upstairs. The party had not resumed. 60 people stood exactly where we had left them, coats already on, sensing something had shifted. Before leaving, the older officer stepped close and said quietly, "You might want to get ahead of this, Mr. Callahan." Formally, "I already have," I told him. He nodded. Brittany watched from across the room. Her husband Daniel stood behind her, hand on her shoulder, eyes moving between me and the officers. For the first time all evening, he was not smiling. The guests left in near silence. Handshakes that lasted a second too long. eyes that couldn't quite meet mine. My executive team filed out without a word, not because they believed Brittany, but because they didn't know what to believe. When the last guest closed the door, it was just the three of us. Brittany sat on the sofa, arms crossed, not looking at me. Daniel stood near the kitchen doorway, reading the room. The birthday cake still sat on the table. 60 candles burned to wax. Nobody spoke. I walked to my desk in the study, opened my laptop, typed one email to my attorney, Marcus Webb. 9 words. They move tonight. Execute everything we discussed. Monday morning. I closed the laptop, walked back into the living room, poured myself a coffee. Anyone want some? I asked. Neither of them answered. That silence told me everything. They had expected panic, anger, a man falling apart in front of his daughter on his 60th birthday. What they got was a man making coffee, and they had absolutely no idea what to do with that. To understand why that basement existed, you need to go back 2 years earlier. I had stood in that same living room and announced Brittany's promotion to Chief Operations Officer. The board had hesitated. She's talented, one member said carefully, but she's young. She's ready, I had insisted. She had worked hard. MBA, long hours, sharp instincts. And Daniel, her husband, had pushed for expansion. We can triple revenue in 3 years, he told us. New distribution centers. New supplier contracts. His confidence was contagious. The first red flag came quietly. A Tuesday evening, late at the office. Everyone else had gone home. I was reviewing vendor invoices for our Memphis facility expansion. Routine work. The kind I had done 1,000 times in 30 years. Then a number stopped me. Approved contractor budget. $340,000. Invoice submitted. $481,200. No change order. No authorization amendment. No explanation anywhere in the file. I checked the payment log. Already processed. I sat with that number for a long time, not panicking, just thinking. Then I did the one thing that would eventually save everything I had built. I made a copy of every document on that desk, drove home, went to the basement, put all in a box. I labeled it Memphis, August, first one. I didn't know yet how many boxes there would be. I didn't know yet that the person creating these discrepancies sat at my dinner table every Sunday, passing the bread and asking about my health with a warm smile. His name is Daniel. My daughter had met him at a pharmaceutical conference 3 years earlier. He arrived in our lives with excellent credentials, a firm handshake, and a way of making every person in a room feel like the smartest one there. I liked him. That is the truth I have to live with. When Brittany brought him to Sunday dinner the 3rd time, she was already glowing. I recognized that look. Her mother used to wear it. He joined Callahan Pharmaceutical in an advisory capacity 14 months after their wedding. The board wasn't thrilled. Tom Wyatt pulled me aside after the vote and said, "Warren, think carefully about this line." I thanked him and overruled the concern. What I didn't understand yet was that Daniel had not married into my family. He had invested in it. He had mapped my company before I ever offered him a chair. He understood our approval processes, our subsidiary structures, our financial blind spots. He had studied everything. Because Daniel Mercer didn't want to work at Callahan Pharmaceutical. He wanted to own it, and he had found the perfect way in. Through a daughter who loved her father enough to fight for him, even when fighting for him meant destroying him. The invoices kept coming. I kept copying them. Atlanta Regional Hub. $218,000 over budget. Routed through a vendor that had been incorporated 11 days before their first invoice. Nashville distribution expansion. $560,000 in project management fees paid to a firm with a 3-month-old website and a registered address that was a mailbox at a printing shop. Memphis, Chicago, Tampa. 9 projects over 26 months. Each one slightly different. Each one calibrated. And I only understood this later. The stage is below the internal threshold that would trigger an automatic audit flag. Someone had studied our systems from the inside. I said nothing to anyone. Not Brittany. Not Tom. Not a single member of the board. Because I already knew that if I raised the alarm before I had everything, the files would disappear, the shell companies would dissolve, the transfers would be restructured, and I would be left with suspicion and no proof. So I kept showing up, kept approving what needed approving, kept smiling at Daniel across the Sunday dinner table. And every week, quietly, after hours, I added another box of basement. By October that year, I knew I needed help. Not a lawyer yet, not the board, a forensic accountant. I found Harold Briggs through a private referral, a man who had spent 11 years working financial crime cases before going private. Discreet, methodical, the kind of professional who speaks in numbers, not opinions. We met in my attorney Marcus Webb's conference room on a Thursday evening. I brought 6 boxes. He worked for 3 hours without speaking, just the scratch of a pen, the quiet slide of paper across the table, occasionally a number circled and connected by a line to another number on another page. When he finished, he took off his glasses and set them down. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "this isn't sloppy accounting. This isn't opportunistic skimming." He paused. "This is engineered extraction. Somebody mapped your approval systems, identified every threshold, and calibrated every transaction to stay invisible. I already knew the shape of it. The total, I asked." He turned a page. "At minimum, $12 million. Possibly more." He looked at me. "Can you give me more time?" I said yes, because I could already see where this was going, and I wanted every single dollar documented before I moved. After my birthday party, the isolation set in fast. The silence hurt more than the shouting. My phone stopped ringing. Neighbors who used away from their driveways suddenly became busy with their mail. By Monday morning, I could feel it walking through the building. The slight pause before people spoke to me. Conversations that stopped a beat too soon. 3 members of my executive team who had been with me for over a decade suddenly had meetings every time I appeared. Staff whispered in corridors. Warrens lost it. Board stepping in. Family situation affecting judgment. I understood what was happening. Daniel had been preparing this for months. My daughter's performance at the party hadn't been the beginning of the campaign. It had been the finale. The real work had been done quietly, in small doses, over a long time. A forgotten meeting here. A repeated question there. Small, almost invisible seeds of doubt planted in the right people's minds. Then Daniel walked into my office one afternoon, hands easy in his pockets, the way a man walks into a room he already thinks belongs to him. "Warren," he said, "you should consider stepping aside gracefully," he said. "Gracefully," I repeated, "for the company's sake. Let Brittany lead." His tone was respectful, concerned, almost kind. I studied him carefully. He believed he was winning. "I'll think about it," I said. He nodded and left. He didn't know that Harold Briggs had filed his interim report that same morning. 3 weeks after the birthday party, the board called a formal meeting. I sat at one end of the table. Daniel sat at the other. Sleeves rolled, a man in control of the room he had not yet earned. The motion was simple. Independent audit. Full scope. Third-party firm. No exceptions. Daniel voted yes immediately. Enthusiastically. He welcomed transparency, he said. He believed in accountability. He looked directly at me when he said it. He was not afraid of a standard audit. He didn't know Harold Briggs had already spent weeks inside our financial systems with a flashlight. The board also voted 8-4 to ask me to step back from daily operations while the review ran. I agreed without argument. The next morning I arrived early, collected 3 personal items from my desk, and left the building by 8. Brittany moved into my office by noon. My family photos came down. Growth projections went up. The name plaque on the door stayed, because no one had thought to change it yet. I drove home, sat on the porch. Marcus called to confirm everything was in motion. "How are you?" he asked. "Patient," I said. Patient was the only thing Daniel Mercer had not planned for. Sterling Bridge Associates ran the audit. Professional firm. Experienced team. Daniel had quietly recommended them. He believed they would surface enough to justify the leadership transition while leaving the deeper architecture untouched. He had not counted on Harold Briggs's pre-audit memorandum, 43 pages, delivered directly to Sterling Bridges' lead auditor before their first day on site, mapping every shell company, every subsidiary layer, every flag transfer, every timestamp. Phase 1 of the audit came back clean. Standard accounts, surface ledgers. Daniel presented that update to the board with visible relief. He used the word vindication. He said the company needed to heal and move forward. Brittany sat beside him and believed it. I was not in that room. I had stepped back, but Marcus attended as my legal representative, and he described the scene to me that evening. He thinks it's over, Marcus said. I know, I said. Phase 2 starts Monday. I know. Phase 2 would go where Daniel had never expected anyone to look. The subsidiary billing structures, the layered vendor contracts, the regional project budgets that Harold had spent months mapping. Daniel had built his architecture to survive a standard audit. What was coming was not standard. Phase 2 hit like a freight train, across 9 projects, 26 months. A consistent pattern of overbilling calibrated to stay fractionally below each project's automatic review threshold. Phantom vendors, shell consulting firms, invoices signed by companies that existed only on paper. The lead auditor used one word to describe it. Signature, he said. Every transaction has the same author. He put a name on the table. The Mercer Group, LLC, registered in Delaware. 1 employee. No office address. Client list. Exclusively Callahan Pharmaceutical Solutions. Owner of record. A man named Brandon Cole. Daniel's college roommate. His best man. Brittany's hands went flat on the table when she heard that name. The total at that point, $15 million. Gone. Over 26 months. Through shell companies, international transfers, and accounts that had been carefully assembled while my daughter unknowingly signed the authorizations she believed were routine. My daughter, who had stood on a step in my living room with a microphone, telling 60 people her father was losing his mind, now sat in a boardroom watching her husband's scheme disassemble one document at a time. If you're still watching, please subscribe right now, because this story is nowhere near over. And the next betrayal is the one I still struggle to say out loud. Brittany didn't go home that night. She sat in her car in the parking garage for 2 hours. I know because Marcus called me and told me he had seen her on his way out. Then she drove to my house. She didn't ring the bell. She knocked. 2 quiet knocks. The way she used it as a child when she'd had a nightmare and didn't want to wake her mother. I opened the door. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. No folder. No microphone. No performance. Just my daughter. I signed things, she said. He brought me documents and said they were routine, and I signed them, Dad. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in the kitchen. I made tea she didn't drink. I thought I was protecting the company, she said. He told me you were getting worse, that your judgment was slipping, that if we didn't act, the board would lose confidence and outside investors would move in and dismantle everything you built. She looked at her hands. I believed him. I looked at my daughter across the kitchen table, and I felt 2 things at exactly the same moment. Grief for what she had been put through, and absolute clarity about what had to happen next. Because Brittany had questioned my competency publicly, the board required a formal cognitive evaluation. I agreed immediately. Marcus advised against it. He said it was designed to create a paper trail regardless of the result. I told him that was exactly why I was doing it. I went on a Wednesday morning to a neurological clinic on the north side of the city for hours of testing, memory sequencing, pattern recognition, processing speed, executive reasoning, the full battery. The evaluating doctor had received only Brittany's referral notes before I walked in. She knew nothing else about me. I passed with scores in the top 13 percentile for my age group across every single category. The doctor added a line at the bottom of her report that I have never forgotten. The individual described in the referral documentation bears no resemblance to the patient evaluated today. The board received copies by Friday. Frank Alderton called me that afternoon. He had been on the board for 18 years. He had voted with me in rooms where it cost him. He couldn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "Warren, I should have called you sooner." I told him we weren't done yet, because we weren't. The second detonation was still coming, and nobody saw it. I revealed the governance clause on a Tuesday, 31 years ago, after watching a close friend lose a company he had built to a board that simply outvoted him. I had added 4 paragraphs to Callahan Pharmaceuticals' founding charter. The clause was simple. If documented executive misconduct involving company assets was established, the original founder retained the right to reassert temporary full operational control pending formal resolution. It had never been triggered. Marcus filed the activation documents that Tuesday afternoon. The board received notification at 4:23 p.m. Daniel's attorneys received their copy at 4:47. I was told Daniel read it 3 times. He called 2 board members within the hour. Neither of them called him back. By Wednesday morning, I walked to the front doors of Callahan Pharmaceutical for the first time in 41 days. My name badge still worked. I had made sure of that. I went directly to my office. Brittany's growth projections were on the wall. My family photos were in a box in the corner. I put the photos back up first. Then I sat down at my desk and opened my email. The first message I sent was to Harold Briggs. 3 words. Go deeper. Everything. The second audit report arrived on a Thursday. Harold Briggs presented it himself. He stood at the head of the conference table and set a single folder in front of every person in the room. $22.4 million, he said. Not sloppy accounting. Not growth miscalculations. Structured siphoning across 9 projects, 26 months, 3 shell consulting firms, all connected. The room absorbed that number. Then he turned the page. Several of the largest disbursements, transfers exceeding $6 million combined, had required dual executive authorization, the kind reserved for major capital movement. One signature was Brittany's. Everyone expected that. The second signature was not Daniel's. Pointed to the name on the authorization trail. Thomas Wyatt. Tom. My oldest friend, my best man, the man who had stood beside me when I founded this company with nothing but a storefront, a loan from my father, and a handshake, a board member for 22 years. My daughter looked at me across the table. "Dad," she said quietly, "that can't be right." I didn't speak, because I had known Tom's name was in those files for 3 weeks. I had been waiting for this room to see it. Tom came to my office that evening. He didn't knock. He never knocked. 30 years of friendship had earned him that. He closed the door behind him. We looked at each other for a long moment. "You're overreacting," he said. "Am I?" I asked. He moved to the chair across from my desk and sat down. He loosened his tie, looked at the window instead of me. The expansion margins were real, Warren. Daniel showed me the projections. The money was being repositioned, not stolen. You would have seen that if you hadn't been so resistant to change. Resistant to change. $22 million. How long, Tom? I asked softly. He was quiet. Did you know the money was leaving the company? More silence. And that silence was my answer. He stood to leave. I built this company with you, he said at the door. I looked at him for what I knew would be the last time as a friend. No, I said. You helped. I built it. He left. I sat alone in my office for a long time after that. Not angry, not vindicated, just profoundly, quietly sad because of all the betrayals in this story. Daniel's greed, the shell companies, the stolen millions. Losing Tom was the one that took the longest to set down. 2 days later, my daughter found emails. She hadn't been looking for them specifically. She had been in Daniel's home office. The room he always kept locked, the one she had always respected because he said it held sensitive client materials. She had a key. She had always had one. She had just never used it alone before. She used it that night, on his secondary laptop, the one she had never seen before. She found a folder. Inside were email threads between Daniel and Tom. Months of them. Subject lines that still make me go cold when I think about them. Warren exit timeline. Board alignment strategy. Accelerate transition. Update. She read them for 2 hours. Then she called me. Dad. Her voice was different from any voice I had ever heard from her. Hollow, like something inside it had been taken out. He planned everything. The board, my journal. He told me what to write. Dad. He told me what to notice and what it meant, and I wrote it down like I was helping. I listened without speaking. He built a whole case against you, she said, and I handed him the materials. Then she said the thing I will remember until the last day of my life. I called the police on my own father at his birthday party. I didn't even hesitate. The emergency board meeting lasted 4 hours. Evidence on the screen, wire transfers, shell company registrations, dual authorization trails, the recovered email threads between Daniel and Tom, timestamp across 18 months. Daniel went first. These were strategic reallocations, he said. Calm, practiced, repositioned capital for growth phase flexibility. Warren's resistance to expansion forced unconventional approaches. Tom spoke next. The company needed new leadership. Warren's hesitation was costing us market position. Then Harold Briggs spoke. Quietly, precisely. $22.4 million cannot be classified as strategic reallocation. It can be classified as wire fraud. The room went silent. My daughter sat at the far end of the table, not beside Daniel, not beside Tom, not beside me, alone, hands flat on the table, eyes straight ahead. Daniel made his final move. He looked directly at Brittany. She approved the transfers. She knew the full picture. Every head in the room turned toward my daughter. She looked at her husband the way you look at a stranger who has just said your name. You told me they were standard capital movements, she said. Quiet, steady. You sat at my kitchen table and walked me through every one. He said nothing. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply stopped talking. And everyone in that room understood why. The vote was unanimous. Daniel Mercer, terminated, effective immediately. Criminal referral filed with the state attorney general. Wire fraud, conspiracy, theft by deception. His college roommate, Brandon Cole, named as co-conspirator. Tom Wyatt, removed from the board pending full legal review. The room emptied slowly. I stayed seated until nearly everyone had gone. Tom was the last one at the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. The same way he had stopped at hundreds of doors in 30 years of meetings, road trips, late-night calls, and Sunday dinners. I built this company with you, Warren, he said. I looked at him. No, Tom, I said. You helped. I built it. He nodded once. Then he left. Daniel's attorneys called Marcus 4 times in the following 48 hours. Marcus returned one call. I didn't feel what I thought I would feel in those hours. I had spent 2 years imagining this outcome. The proof complete. The vote unanimous. The men who had orchestrated my humiliation walking out of a room, they no longer had any right to enter. What I actually felt was tired. The particular exhaustion of a man who has been carrying something very heavy, alone, in silence, for a very long time. The legal machinery moved fast. Daniel's pharmaceutical advisory license, the credential that had been his ticket into Callahan, his legitimacy, his reason for being trusted, was referred to the state licensing board for emergency suspension review. His attorney sent a letter characterizing the entire situation as a family dispute, an internal power struggle, a founder in decline versus a management team trying to modernize. Marcus sent back 1 page. Attached to it, Harold Briggs's complete forensic report, the cognitive evaluation results, the governance clause filing, the email threads, the shell company registrations. We didn't hear back for 9 days. When we did, it was not from Daniel's attorneys. It was from the state attorney general's office. They were opening a formal criminal investigation. Brandon Cole, the college roommate, the shell company owner, hired his own attorney within the week. His accounts were frozen pending the investigation. The Cayman transfers were flagged through international banking channels. Within 2 weeks, state pharmaceutical compliance opened a formal investigation into the $22.4 million discrepancy. Not just internal misconduct, possible licensing violations. Daniel's professional license was now under review. Tom faced civil liability for breach of fiduciary duty. The company's name, my name, was under scrutiny. My daughter sat across from me in the conference room as attorneys explained the process. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered. I believed her, but intent doesn't erase damage. The board issued a public statement acknowledging executive misconduct and reaffirming my leadership during stabilization. The same employees who had avoided me now stopped by my office again. One by one, quiet apologies, handshakes that lasted longer than usual, respect returning slowly. Daniel, meanwhile, stopped coming to the office entirely. My daughter moved back into her childhood bedroom for a few days, not because I asked her to, because she didn't know where else to go. And for the first time since my birthday, she wasn't standing above me. She was standing alone. The divorce filing happened quietly. No announcement, no drama, just paperwork. My daughter sat at the kitchen table late one night, staring at the forms. Her wedding ring lay beside her coffee cup. "He said he did it for us," she told me. I nodded. Ambition always hides behind love. Daniel's accounts were frozen pending investigation. His reputation collapsed almost overnight. Invitations disappeared. Calls stopped. Tom tried to reach me twice. I didn't answer. The board formally removed him the following week. 20 years of partnership ended in a single vote. My daughter cried that evening. Not for the company, not for the money, for the illusion. "I really thought you were slipping," she said through tears. "I thought I was saving Callahan Pharmaceutical. You thought you were saving me from myself." I replied gently. She nodded. That hurt more than the police at my birthday, because my daughter didn't hate me. She doubted me, and doubt, once planted, can grow into something dangerous. 3 weeks later, she came into my office alone. No lawyers, no board members, no Daniel, just my daughter. She stood in front of my desk the way she used when she was 10 years old, asking for advice on a science project. "I thought you were slipping," she said again. Her voice was steady this time. "I wasn't slipping," I answered. "I was watching." She closed her eyes briefly. "I humiliated you." "Yes." "I called the police on my own father." "Yes." Silence stretched between us. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair. "I don't need revenge," I said. The truth handled that. Daniel had lost his job, his license, his standing. Tom had lost his seat on the board and faced lawsuits. But my daughter, she had lost her certainty. That was punishment enough. "I still love you," I said quietly. She nodded, tears in her eyes. But something had changed. Trust doesn't snap back. It rebuilds slowly, if at all. Callahan Pharmaceutical stabilized over the next 3 months. The forensic audit allowed us to recover $9 million through asset freezes and insurance claims. The rest was tied up in litigation. I reinstated senior leadership members who had stayed loyal. We tightened compliance systems, introduced dual oversight on every major transaction. Employees began to speak confidently again about the company's future. Investors returned. The stock value rebounded. And for the first time in a long while, I walked through the distribution floor without feeling eyes on my back. My daughter resigned as COO voluntarily. Not forced, voluntary. She told the board she needed time to rebuild herself. I respected that. One afternoon, I stood alone in my office, the office she once rearranged when she thought she had replaced me. The framed photo of her with her science ribbon sat back on my desk, right where it belonged. I had regained control, but something inside me felt different, not victorious. Finished. 6 months after my birthday, I called a full company meeting. Employees filled the auditorium, faces I had known for decades. "My time here is ending," I told them. Murmurs spread instantly. I will be transitioning Callahan Pharmaceutical into an employee trust over the next year. Ownership will belong to the people who built it. Applause erupted. I didn't step down because I was weak. I stepped down because I was free. My daughter watched from the back of the room. She didn't try to reclaim power. She didn't argue. She understood. She had tried to take control, to save the company. In the end, I saved it by letting go. Daniel lost his license. Tom faced civil penalties. Arrogance dismantled them both. As for me, I walked away with my dignity. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below telling me, what would you have done in my situation? I read every single one, and your perspective matters to me. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't fighting. It's knowing your worth and walking away.